Psalms 90 and 1. Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. A word for the sponsor. Ever so often, just when the movie seems to be coming to a dramatic point, we are often irritated by the fact that they say, now a word for the sponsor. Often we have gotten up and gone and gotten a drink of water without listening to the word about the sponsor. Insensitive of the fact that if it were not for the sponsor, we wouldn't see the program. Right in the midst of something, and sometimes a ball game, they try to take it between endings, but sometimes it's interfered with because a word is spoken for the sponsor. And we who have been born again, and in whom the Spirit of God does dwell, the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead, that causes us to live and move and have our beings. Ever so often, we ought to say a word for the sponsor. Ever so often, we ought to let the person next to us and around us know that I am what I am by the grace of God. I'm who I am. For what I am, He made me. Where I am, He brought me. What I have, He gave me. And what I know, He taught me. At the national conventions that we hold, I know of the importance of hearing the reports from the boards. That's very important. I know of the importance of hearing the annual addresses from the various departmental presidents and the general president. I know of the significance of fraternal greetings, and I know of the importance of making certain proclamations, announcements, and pronouncements as it relates to world affairs. The world ought to hear what we've had to say here in Washington as it relates to Christian education, foreign mission, as it relates to the board, publishing house, as it relates to civil rights. The world ought to hear it. Washington ought to hear about what we're doing. But I believe the greatest thing that ought to be heard while we are here is a word about our God. We are not a godless people. We have not come here on our own. We have been brought here. We are not people who can take care of themselves. We are cared people. Somebody has been watching over us, providing for us, leading and guiding us. And tonight we ought to say a word for the sponsor. It was Moses who is said to have written this psalm, and it appears that this is what he had in mind. He had in mind announcing and putting in writing so that others could read it as to the cause of our being. He wanted himself to give credit to the right person. He wanted the world to understand who brought him to where he was. And then he wanted to leave it on record so that unborn generations could understand that we have been a cared person, a cared for person. And it is for that reason that he addresses reverently God by saying, Lord, you have been. You're the one. I don't have to think about this long. I don't have to do no research. I don't have to look around wondering how I got over. Lord, you have been. You have been. You're the one. And I think we ought to speak loudly on that as a group, a denomination, as a group of people of Negroid background. We ought to announce loud and clear, Lord, you have been. Now, we need to say that because there are a whole lot of people who don't know how we made it. And there are a whole lot of children and grandchildren that don't know how we have made it. And then we need to be ourselves ever conscious of the fact that we have come from a mighty long way. We have a whole lot to gripe about. We have a whole lot to complain about. We're not where we want to be. But we need ever so often to remind ourselves that we have come from a mighty long way. And we did not get here because government has been kind. We did not get here because the rulers of this country have been on our side. We have not gotten here because we've had armies to deliver us as did Kuwait. No planes flew in to get the shackles off of our feet. No bombs were dropped and plastered the South to get us out from under slavery. Lord, thou hast been. Now, there are a whole lot of people who have said, well, you don't have to say it all the time. You don't have to say it all that often. God knows your heart. Well, that's all right, but you don't treat the Raiders that way. If you're a Raider fan, you say, Raiders, I'm with you. If you're a Dodger fan, you say, Dodgers, I'm for you. And if you're any other kind of fan, something down in Atlanta called the Braves or something, you say that about them. But when it comes to God, we try to become sedate and pious, believing that he does not inhabit our praise. But the truth is, he's glad to hear us say, Lord. I said he's glad to hear us. Particularly not asking for nothing, not begging for nothing, not telling him I'm almost going under, but just sometimes saying, Lord, thou hast been. We need to say something. Now, don't take for granted that these quiet folk in your church are quiet and sedate because they've been to school. I've been to school. I've been there several times. And I didn't go there and get cold. I went there and set the school on fire. Because in order to get to school, it took a miracle. I was reared in a log cabin. I was given $5 to go to school. When I got there, I didn't have but $1.92. And the sign up above the bursar's desk said $82. Money order, cash, or cashiers. And I had $1.92. But I got in line. Because before I left, my mama said, this is all I have. is $5. But I'm going to pray for you. So now get on that bus and go on to school. And so I got in line, and then there was 2 in line ahead of me. And I didn't have but $1.92 in my pocket. And the sign plainly read $83. And then there was 1 in front of me. And she got her receipt and folded up her money, and I'm next with $1.92. And at that time, somebody touched me on the shoulder and said, "Are you E.V. Hill?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Get out of line." I said, "Please, sir, don't put me out of line. I want to go to school, and if you just let me in line, stay in line and register, I'll be good. I'll wash clothes. I'll scrub floors. I know how to pick cotton. I know how to cook. I'll scrub pots." He said, "Get out of line." I said, "Please, sir, don't. I have to stay here." He said, "I said, get out of line." He said, "Are you Ed Hill from Sweet Home?" I said, "Yes." He said, "We've been looking for you all this morning." He said, "You didn't get our letter?" I said, "No, sir. I just came on. Mama told me she's going to pray, and I just came on." He said, "Well, we have a 4-year scholarship. We have a 4-year scholarship, and have you paid your money yet?" I said, "No, sir, not quite. I was about to." He said, "Well, get out of line. And don't pay your money, because it would be hard to get it back." He said, "But get out of line." And in the light of that, I can't keep quiet. Y'all can keep quiet if you want to, but I got to say something, because, Lord, thou hast been. Thou hast been. I said, "Thou hast been." When you were reared in a log cabin, and now when you sleep upstairs in a Hilton Deluxe, you can't keep quiet. You've got to say, "Lord, I got to say a word for the sponsor. I want you to know who brought Dr. Hill to where he is before he was Dr. Hill." Have I got a witness here? And so these quiet people ought to wake up and say a word for the sponsor. It's one of the reasons why I like Jesse Jackson. He likes to say a word. He gives credit to God when he starts talking, and I have been with him in political rallies, and he says, "Giving honor to God." We need to speak a word for our sponsor. And that's what Moses wanted to do. He wanted to say something for the sponsor. Have I got a witness? And some of you here, you're not all that quiet. You're just quiet in here. But at home, as the world turns, on the edge of night, looking for a brighter day for all of my children, when that horse you bet on is about to win, you don't sit there and don't crack a smile. You all up in the chair, jumping up and down. But now you just don't have nothing for God. But the Raiders didn't bring you to where you are. The Braves didn't bring you. The Bulls didn't bring you. Lord, thou hast been. Thou hast been. I wonder will you join me tonight in giving a word for the sponsor. Thou hast been. He said, "Thou hast been our dwelling place. You have been the one to whom we have fled time after time." For he said, "In all generations," not just one time. But Moses said here, "I've kept a record of my father's father, as well as this generation. And I have discovered that in all generations," oh, bless his name, "it ain't been nobody but you. When Israel was not a people, Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place. When Israel was facing famine, Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place. When we were taken down as slaves to Israel, to Egypt, And when we had to make brick without straw, Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place. And when you decided to deliver us, no army came to our rescue. No proclamation was uttered. But you delivered us. You were our dwelling place. And we came out of Egypt. Lord, thou art the one that caused us to march out with silver and gold, with victuals and with livestock. And I want to give you credit for it right now. Lord, thou hast been. I want to speak a word for you. For we've had rough times. We came to the Red Sea, and you flip-flopped the sun. You put sundown on their side and sun up on our side, so that when I raised the rod and the sea divided, and it did divide. I said it divided. And we walked across on dry land. Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. And then when we got on the other side and our enemy tried to follow us, he raised his rod and Pharaoh's army got drowned. Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place. When we got thirsty, you gave us water out of a dry rock. When we got hungry, you rained down manna from on high. When we were bitten by the serpents, you told us to look and live. When our enemies came upon us, you gave us power to slew our enemies. Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Hallelujah. Before the world was made, before the earth was formed, before the sea came forth, Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place. When the rains come, we can go in you. When the storms blow, we can hide in you. When the enemy is on our trail, it appears to me that we can sing that song with Moses tonight. For we are of Negroid descendants. We can also say, Lord, thou hast been our across the seas, stacked up like cordwood, put us down in the south, reintroduced us to the name Jesus. We already had the name. We got it in the 1st century. We didn't get it in the 14th century. We got it in the 1st century. Alexander is a part of Africa. We already knew about him, but we forgot to call his name. And he had to send us over here in order to hear his name, in order to send us back, that Africa can be saved. Lord, thou hast been in the cotton patch. Lord, thou hast been with nobody to fight our battles. Lord, thou hast been in a log cabin. Lord, thou hast been against the Ku Klux Klan. Lord, thou hast been in discrimination. Lord, thou hast been. And then you ought to be able to make it personal. Lord, you have been my dwelling place. Somebody, he healed you. Somebody, he delivered you. Somebody, he made your enemy behave. Somebody, he brought you through. He brought you out. He brought you over. He brought you around. He held your hand. Lord, 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 thou hast been our dwelling place, our bread, our lawyer, our water, our